Does your lab treat you like just another sample? Meet Brothers Laboratory Services. BLS is the lab built by water treaters for water treaters. BLS is family-owned, centrally located in the United States, and designed to make your life easier. They speak your language, understand your challenges, and deliver fast, reliable results with the personal attention that makes a real difference. Their AWT-certified CWT experts will help you create custom test packages that save you time and money. And because BLS operates independently, confidentiality is guaranteed. No sensitive client data required. With competitive pricing, streamlined ordering, and dependable results, you can stay focused on what matters most, growing your water treatment business. Ready for intelligent analytics and results you can trust? Visit scalinguph2o.com/BLS. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/BLS. Reach out today to connect with a real expert and experience the Brothers Laboratory Services difference. Think back to the last time you were uncertain about a reading. Wouldn't it be great if you could trust every measurement? That's why I love what Hach has done with their NH6000 SC ammonium analyzer. It's built on gas sensing electrode technology and gives you reliable, interference-free readings, so you can confidently focus on your work. It's tough enough to live outdoors all year, so you can put it where you actually need it. Even better, you only swap out the reagents every 6 months. That's just 2 quick maintenance touch points a year, freeing up your time for what matters. Plus, when you need help, real people at Hach are ready to back you up. They've been the trusted name in water quality for decades. Ready to see for yourself? Visit scalinguph2o.com/Hach. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/HACH. Check it out today and discover how precision can really pay off. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, the host of the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And folks, it is December, just days left in 2025. Again, I don't know where the time went. It seems like we were just preparing for 2025. And now 2025 is almost over, and we are now preparing for 2026. Well, nation, are you like me? Are you not alone? Does it seem like the years are just going quicker and quicker? Well, no need to worry. We're, of course, experiencing the time on this planet at exactly the same rate. I think the older that we get, the more experiences that we have, the quicker it seems that time goes. But let's face it, we need to make the most of all the time that we have. And it's my hope that you spending about an hour with me each and every week on the Scaling Up H2O podcast is one of the ways that you are trying to make that hour as significant as possible. Let's face it, you are in the best job in the world. You are an industrial water treater. And as an industrial water treater, we have so many responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is keeping up with all of the things that keep getting thrown at us. There's new technology, there's new chemistries, there's new ways of doing just about everything. So not only do we need to learn how to do something once, we need to relearn that, and we need to challenge that, and we need to make sure that we're always applying and deploying the best technology, the best knowledge, the best methods, and all of that is why this is not an easy job. Now, put on top of that we've got just a few short days left until we end 2025, and because of that, I hope that you are making sure that your goals are not only going to get achieved this year, but you're trying to figure out what you're going to set for 2026. And I hope that you absolutely crush what you are setting out to do this year. Now, if you're crushing them, you've probably already completed them. But if you're still working on that, and all those people out there that are working on their 2025 goals, you still have some days left. I wish the best of luck to you, which really isn't luck, it's discipline. So I wish the best of discipline. Now, a lot of people will use discipline to see if they can do something new within the new year. And a lot of people are doing dry January. That is where you don't have any alcohol for the entire month of January. We've got several people in the mastermind that started doing this in January of last year, and then they decided to push it all the way through the entire year. And they say they're sleeping better. They say that their complexion's looking better, all these different things. So maybe that's something that you want to try. But in addition to dry January, there's also a new trend with dry December. I guess that has more alliteration, it rhymes. But dry December, more and more people are doing. And they're doing that to kind of gear up for 2026. So I thought it might be interesting to look into, where does this actually come from? Well, dry December is a throwback to prohibition, which actually ended in December of 1933. And prohibition was from 1920 to 1933. And it wasn't illegal to drink during prohibition, but it was illegal to sell alcohol, and it was illegal to manufacture alcohol, and it was illegal to transport alcohol. So with all of that, there were a lot of people that stockpiled their own alcohol, and then there was a whole bunch of people that decided that they were going to skirt around the law and do all those things: manufacture, transport, and sell. And of course, there's multiple movies and books and lots of history around that. But that's where the speakeasy came into existence. And I don't know if you've ever been to a speakeasy. We have some replicas around Atlanta, and there's one in downtown Buckhead where you wouldn't know that it was there. There's a secret spot on a wall where, if you knock in this restaurant, a slide will open and somebody will ask you for a password. If you give them the right password, they will open the door, and there's a whole bar down there that is secret. And there are restaurants all over the country that have these speakeasies. And a lot of times when we travel, we'll look for these because they're just cool, and we'll find out what the password is. And my wife and I aren't big drinkers, but we are big history buffs, and we are into things that are cool. So the next time you go to a new city, or maybe even your own city, look and see if you have any of these. Now, if you're trying to do dry December or dry January, maybe don't explore these during those months. But we've done that in a couple of cities, and we've got some great stories from that. And it's just cool to know about something that other people don't know about. Now, prohibition, I have just been fascinated by that area of United States history. I've read a lot of books on that, how it affected the economy, why they decided to do prohibition, all the different conspiracy theories and things around that. So if you want to get lost in just a minutia of all of these different theories and what was going on during the 30s and all through prohibition, really interesting to learn about that. Now, I will say that doctors were very well to do during that time that would prescribe alcohol as one of the medicinal items that somebody could use. And I read a story about this one doctor who wasn't unwealthy when prohibition started, but he amassed a very large fortune as Prohibition went on because he was one of those prescribing doctors. Anyway, all this to say that a lot of us will try to figure out what can we do, what new discipline can we develop during the next new year. And a lot of people are doing dry December to gear up for that. So maybe that's something that you want to do. Now, I'm not really into resolutions. And when we get into next year's very first episode, I'll talk to you again like I normally do during my episodes of the first of the year, on how I do goal planning and how I hope to encourage you to do goal planning. I'm not a big fan of resolutions because normally those are big pie in the sky things. And if there were something that you could have done, you would have done. And just because the date on the calendar changes, nothing magic changed except the date. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have developed the discipline or the habits to get that done. And that's what we're going to talk about, as we always talk about on the first episode of the year, where we talk about how we can develop some of these habits. And I'll share some of the books that I really enjoy talking about when it comes to items such as that. So let me know on one of the posts that we do on social media. Are you a dry December or a dry January person? Like I said, this was a big trend in the Rising Tide Mastermind, and there are several people that are continuing to do that through the entire year. Now, somebody that only drinks water and who is our friend of the Scaling Up H2O podcast is James McDonald, of course, award-winning James McDonald. And here is a brand new installment of Water You Know.
Hello and welcome to Water You Know, the game show where we find out what you know about industrial water treatment, drop by drop. So pump up your brain, take out that test kit of knowledge, and prepare to answer this week's question on What Do You Know? Today's question is, how much heat energy does it take to heat 1 pound of liquid water by 1 degree Fahrenheit? It takes 1 BTU, or British thermal unit, of heat energy. The metric equivalent to raise 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius is 1 calorie, or 4.184 joules of heat energy. I'm James McDonald, and thanks for playing along with us. Stay tuned for next week's episode of What Do You Know?
Well, thank you, James. And as you know, Scaling Up Nation, we are wrapping up What Do You Know? And are we going to get something from James McDonald next year? Well, of course we are. But what are we going to get from James next year? So I know you are as curious as I am. So stay tuned for little hints on the last episode of the year. And of course, we will all listen together the brand new segment that James has for us on the very first episode in January. Once again, James, thanks for all that you do for the community. And I can't wait to learn with the Scaling Up Nation what you are going to be doing for the Scaling Up Nation all of next year. Well, Nation, I get people that tell me they really enjoy learning about all of the different expos and conventions and trainings that are available to them by going to scalinguph2o.com, going over to our events page, and just looking at all the things that are out there that are related to water. Now, it was just a few years ago. Well, it's not a few years ago anymore. I guess it was almost 5 or 6 years ago, where we were not doing any conventions. There was no travel. There was no gatherings. We couldn't have a large group of people together. And our community really suffered for that because there is just so much that happens when we all get together in person. And we weren't able to do that for almost 2 years. Well, thank goodness we are back to normal. Thank goodness we're able to gather and we're able to network. And if you are looking for places to do this next year, well, we have created a one-stop shop for you to go and see all the things that we know about in the industrial water treatment community. And of course, as I just mentioned, that's going to scalinguph2o.com, going over to our events page. And I want you to look through the list of the things that are coming up in 2026 so you can plan in advance. You can put that on your calendar and you can protect that time. When you do that, you are able to schedule around the important things that you want to go to. You're able to pre-plan weeks ahead so you don't have those emergencies at a particular account. You're not going to run out of product because you've already done the math for that. You know that you can last an extra week or two so you can go to that event. But folks, if you don't plan that way, you're going to have something that comes up. You're going to have something that gets in the way and you're not going to be able to go. So here is my plea to everybody in the Scaling Up Nation is go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our events page, figure out what you are going to do this year and mark that time on your calendar so you can protect that. And maybe you and I will be at an event together. And I love it when people from the Scaling Up Nation come up to me and tell me how they are using this show or something that they learned on this show, or even better, something they want on this show. Because as you know, eventually we're going to run out of stuff to talk about. For some reason, we haven't. We're almost 500 episodes in, and it's because of all of you out there in the Scaling Up Nation that are constantly allowing me to get new content through your ideas, to meet new people through your connections, and to expand on topics that we've already talked about. So Nation, don't stop doing that. Please continue to do that, because that is the best way that we get new content, and we know it's relevant content because it's coming from you. So Nation, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for continuing to make this the best career on the planet. We are industrial water treaters. How cool is that? Nation, as you know, we have some of the best guests in all of podcasts. And of course, they are in the industrial water treatment industry. And we all learn so much from our guests, but we only have so much time on each podcast. That's why I love to invite previous guests back for new episodes. And Nation, that's exactly what we have in store for you today. Here is that interview. My lab partner today is returning guest, Dr. Kelle Zeiher, project manager at Garratt-Callahan and self-proclaimed water goddess. Kelle, welcome back to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Thank you, Trace. It's great to be back here with you. I've always enjoyed our conversations, and I look forward to having another great time with you and your audience.
I am looking forward to that as well. And I have to say, we saw each other at the most recent AWT conference in Louisville. I think I was walking to a meeting. You came running up to me and you said, "Hey, we've got to do this podcast again. I want to come back on." That was awesome.
Exactly. So finally, we managed to get together to do that.
Yeah, so the audience doesn't know this, but I had a cold in the beginning of the year, and then I think you had a cold afterwards. So we finally managed to make it happen.
And we both seem to have good voices today, so that's great.
That's always good for a podcast, I find.
Yeah, very helpful.
Well, Kelle, last time you were on the show was February of last year. That was episode 351, and an episode entitled Maximizing Water's Potential, Tech and Water Treaters in Perfect Harmony. And we got so many people that said they enjoyed that episode. So glad that you are back. And at the end of that episode, we learned that you write mystery novels and you put some of your water treatment chemical prowess knowledge into those novels. I just love that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I would love to. So I used to read a lot of mystery novels and other things. And nobody ever reflected me and my worldview. And so one day I said, we need to have a good scientist in there trying to use the scientific method to solve mystery problems. And things began to expand from there. For those of you who may have looked at my first mystery, it's called The Cupcake Caper. And I deliberately focused the titles and the covers to a largely non-scientific middle-aged female audience because that's the core audience. But hidden under all of that packaging, I have real science and real water treatment chemistry going on. And in fact, I don't know if anybody remembers, but some things about SDS sheets and some other good laboratory practices are pivotal to solving the mystery. And so it's been fun to do that and to also create characters out of my colleagues and former colleagues. So if any of you want to be a character, let me know.
Do they know that they're in your novels?
If I like them, they do.
All right. Very interesting. Now people are going to have to read just to see if they're in it or not. Can they find those on Amazon?
They can find those on Amazon. It would be under my pen name, and that would be Kelle Z. Riley, Riley, or kellezriley.net. And that's Kelle with Kelle.
We will make sure to have those links on our show notes page so people can see if they're in the stories or not.
That would be excellent. And I'm also welcome plot ideas from people out there in the industry. What would you like to see that you haven't seen yet to make you a star?
Kelle, what have you been up to other than maybe finding some new stories to write about since we last had you on episode 351?
Well, since then, I've continued to develop some new water treatment areas of expertise and work on some patented initiatives to help us recycle water more effectively and more quickly. And those are really, I think, poised to ramp up soon, especially when we look at things like data centers and the new overwhelming amount of AI that people are starting to use in their everyday lives. Well, all of that relates back to it has to be stored somewhere in what colloquially people call the cloud storage, and what realistically is a server farm with tons of microchips processing data. And one interesting little tidbit is that for every gigabyte of data that we store somewhere, quote, in the cloud or on a data farm, it takes about 53 gallons of purified water to keep that air around the area cool enough so that those microchips don't burn out.
That's fascinating. I have never heard that statistic before.
That is something I do. I think you might remember from the last time. I have a number of statistics on where water goes and how it works in creating the goods and services that we use every day. And this was a new one that I added when I learned about the 53 gallons per gigabyte of data.
And you're so right. We think it goes into the cloud. I know we don't think that, but people will use that term. Well, it's not a cloud. It's a heat producing area that we have to use water to take that heat where we don't want it and take it out to the atmosphere where it's not going to bother anybody. And we use a tremendous amount of water in that process. And you started thinking, how do we do a better job with this?
Exactly. And the key to everything that we do, and for those of you who haven't thought about it in this term, water is not a limitless resource. It's a finite resource, and we simply purify it and reuse it over and over again. And it actually touches everything that we wear, everything that we eat, everything that we produce. Almost all the goods and services and ideas that come through our daily lives have a water component. What that means to us as we become more affluent and we want more interesting goods and services is that we have to clean the water up more quickly and reuse it more efficiently because we keep reusing and reusing it. And in fact, if you look at graphs that talk about water usage, our projected future water usage outstrips our projected future population growth because now all of the people in the growing populations want the goods and services that water produces. So we as water treaters and as people in the industry have to start thinking about how we're more efficient.
At a recent paper you delivered at the Process Heating and Cooling Show, you said that 50% of all the water use in the United States is going towards cooling. Again, an amazing statistic.
One of the things that I like to think about is occasionally when the news media says that we have a drought, and they think of a drought as lack of rainfall. When I think of a drought, I think of we haven't refilled our aquifers enough. So it's both lack of rainfall and not refilling the aquifers. The first thing that anybody does is a local politician or maybe even a state politician will get on and say, we're going to ration watering. We're going to ask you not to water your lawn. The watering of the lawn is coming out of what is about 12% of our water usage. 12% of our water use is for domestic use. So that's a tiny drop in a bucket, whereas 50% of our water use is for industrial cooling. So in those drought situations, it's even more critical that we optimize our industrial cooling and continue to reuse that water more effectively and efficiently. And it is statistics like that that led me to think of how can we minimize our liquid discharge and how can we do it in ways that are accessible to more and more industries that are involved.
Something else I love about that statistic is we are in an industry that people want to help the planet. They want to be more sustainable. And if it's not that, they want to help their clients spend less money buying resources. And when you hear a statistic like that, you can instantly go to that bottom line and say, I am making a difference here. Because I'm in this industry, I can make a tremendous impact.
We as water treaters sometimes forget what great power we have to make an impact in the world. If I can go back to our data center discussion just a little bit, while we were talking about all the things that happen in data centers, as data centers expand, they look for places where they have huge amounts of land accessible. And often those are in arid desert-like regions that have huge amounts of land, but not much, what? Not much water. And therein lies our business. So one of the initiatives, and I cannot talk about who this customer is, I have to be very cautious, but there was a landlocked data center that had a variable water source, some of it from snowmelt during parts of the year and some of it elsewhere. And this particular data center is doing quite well and wants to expand their capabilities. And as they're expanding it, I became part of a team that looked at the sustainability in terms of everything from building materials and power systems to how water was used. And of course, my focus and the focus of the other people on the team that I worked with were on the water side. But here we are taking somewhere in an arid region that needs to reuse their water because 53 gallons of water for every gigabyte of data stored. We needed to maximize that. So we put in several proposals, and one of the optimization steps, as you would see in the process heating and cooling and other presentations, is that you're going to drive your cooling tower cycles up as high as you can. Once you do that, you have a wastewater stream from the concentrated cooling water. Often to drive the water cycles up, you also use something like reverse osmosis to add in purified water. And we all know that reverse osmosis has its own wastewater stream. And so what do we do with that cooling tower concentrated water stream and the concentrated RO waste stream? And the challenge becomes, can we take those, extract the minerals, and bring back purified water so that you can reuse that water and now have the minerals that are capable of being buried in a regular landfill? And so that was what I was working on with the minimal liquid discharge idea.
Now, in order to do that, you say that pretreatment is everything. What do you mean by that?
So each and every component of what we handle in a water treatment system is dependent on the component or the process that comes right in front of it. When it comes to reverse osmosis membranes, one thing that many people don't realize is that there are itty bitty tiny flow channels in that system. And so the smaller the flow channel in a system, the more easily it can get clogged with a piece of debris. Much like if you think about our modern electronics, this more microelectronics we pack into a chip, that goes into your cell phone, the more easily a little bit of debris can cause a problem with that microchip. Same thing with the small flow channel in certain things like reverse osmosis systems. So pre-treatment means we have to get rid of large components, large pieces of material that might clog or impact that flow channel. And then we have to very carefully treat what's going through there so that as salts concentrate in the channel and begin to form scale, we keep that scale from laying down and blocking the channel and causing problems.
So we're figuring out how many times we can concentrate up the cooling water. We get it up to that maximum, and then that's going to an RO unit?
No, actually, the RO unit comes before the cooling water comes into the feedwater side, and it blends with the normal water that would be going there, what might be a city source or a well water source. And so it reduces the alkalinity and the dissolved solids in that water. And that is what allows our cycles of our tower to go up. And then we have to balance what about that waste stream with the RO and how high have we cycled the tower? And now what are we going to do with waste streams?
So when you're looking at putting an RO on a cooling tower, what would a normal amount of concentrations be in a cooling tower versus now with an RO system?
So in some of the studies we've done, for example, we were looking at a place that had 3 cycles of concentration with a tower. And if we did RO blending and pretreatment, we could go up easily to 6 cycles of concentration. And so it depends strongly on what is in your water and how much RO water you're going to blend in, with the caveat that as we blend in RO water, we also become a little bit more aggressive to our metallurgies. And so it is a balancing act, which is why we have so many of us in the water treatment professional world to make sure that we balance it correctly and we maximize both the usefulness of the water and minimize the aggressiveness of the water.
Going from 3 to 6 cycles of concentration, what type of water savings was that at this customer that we shall not mention?
It was on the order of millions of gallons of water savings annually.
That's huge.
And then we could take the millions of gallons of water saving, and if we coupled onto that a way of getting the minerals out of this highly concentrated water, we could then save another couple $1 million worth of water savings and water disposal costs and other things.
A buzzword that's been around for a while is zero discharge. Is that what we're talking about here?
I'm going to say yes and no. Yes, we zero and zero liquid discharge, which we call ZLD, is a theoretical desire. We never get quite to zero. What we are doing now or proposing is doing minimal liquid discharge or MLD. So we're not going to get you as close to zero as a liquid discharge system would, but we are going to get you very close to that. So the reason being that for zero liquid discharge, generally, that involves huge pieces of equipment and large energy consumption because you are essentially evaporating off the water. And if you want to reuse that, you have to first evaporate it, then capture it, and essentially go through a distillation process where you have a solid remaining at the bottom and you have purified water. So what we're doing is finding an alternative way that is less energy intensive that gives you most of the water, say 80, 85, or 90% back rather than 98 or 99% back.
In your paper, you mentioned that one of the hardest challenges was dealing with high-hardness wastewater. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, absolutely. So the high hardness wastewaters are the ones where you have a lot of dissolved materials, particularly minerals such as calcium and magnesium salts, often high silica wastes and sometimes high metal wastes. And those need to be treated specifically. Now, in the past, if you had a raw water or if you even have a wastewater containing that, it used to involve very large clarifiers. Clarifiers are sensitive animals, if you will. You have to have slow mixing zones and fast mixing zones and time for materials to agglomerate and coagulate and flock together and then precipitate out. And so all of these things take time and space, and that gets really difficult to continue to manage. And so what we were able to do was come up with ways to make that process happen much more quickly in a way that can take maybe 15 minutes to do what took hours beforehand and can take smaller space.
The system you developed is called AEROS. Can you tell us what that stands for and just tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So AERO stands for Aqueous Recovery Optimization System. And I will tell you that we actually, at one point in time, tried to come up with a nice name that would roll off the tongue when you gave it a nickname. And that was kind of something that I never expected to be doing as a water treatment scientist, sitting there brainstorming names. But that is the name that we eventually came up with on the system. And it's quite simple in concept. And in actuality, it involves a few special additives that I won't talk about. But the simple concept is pretty much a one-pot mixing of the wastewater that contains the high solids, some additives that help assist or encourage precipitation, and then conditioning agents that help make that stay faster. And then we follow by a specific kind of sequential mechanical and membrane filtration to remove the solid materials. And once we do that, an RO polishing step at the end gives you back purified water. And the beauty of this is that when you are taking the solids out of the filtration system, if you put them into a filter press, for example, all of that filter press liquid can go right back to the front of the system into the treatment tank to encourage things. And the way it's managed with the chemistries we've chosen and the PLCs that actually monitor the system, again, this happens super quickly. In a matter of minutes, we get to beautiful flocks that filter out nicely and give us purified water at the end very quickly and relatively easily. And this is a compact size system.
Now, you mentioned pressing out the solids. You've had customers actually sell the solid waste.
Well, we propose that those solid waste actually can go into cement building or other construction type areas. So if you as the customer don't bring in any regulated materials that you're trying to remove, then you have this solid waste that could be repackaged and used for something else. So it could become an income stream as well if you didn't want to send it out as a waste stream.
With the regular RO, you've got a waste stream of the concentrated water. Do you have that with the AERO system as well?
You have a very small one at that point. So your AERO system concentrate, if you do it the basic way, is going to be probably 10% of what you have going into the system. And what will be disposed of is primarily monovalent sodium and chloride type salts. So you're not dealing with the heavy metal precipitant salts, and you're not dealing with the calcium and the magnesium and the scale forming salts.
Kelly, you've got a client that's coming to you, and let's say they're a data center and they want to save water, and you have this complete arsenal of things that you can offer them that you guys do at your company. What's your process to figure out what the best course of action is?
So we like to be very involved with each of our customers. And so generally, if a customer is interested in water recycle, we will have them working with our sales territory managers would be their first point of contact. And then we bring in our specialists, and I'm part of the specialist team that comes in. And we really want to get to know the customer, know what their water issues are, what they're trying to achieve with their issues, and then we start talking about what the options are and what we can bring to the table. And we also need to know, and I'll be very upfront with you, zero liquid discharge systems, like we talked about, which use the evaporative systems, those can cost multiple millions of dollars for very small systems. We priced out one 20-gallon per minute system. It cost almost $8 million for the capital to do a zero liquid discharge.
What would the ROI be on that?
The ROI on that would be a long, long payback time for sure. But if you're in a water stressed area and you have a regulation that says you shall not discharge water, you have to abide by that. But what we are able to do with the AERO system is take something that might have cost $8 million and bring it down to under $1 million in capital expenditures and not a lot of electrical costs and components for the evaporative, simple chemistries. And so while it's not for the faint of heart and it isn't totally inexpensive, comparatively speaking, it is much more accessible.
I'm curious, you had this problem where it's going to cost $8 million. We've got to come up with a better solution. You found one that was under $1 million. What's your process for figuring out new technologies and where do you begin?
I think that when we come to figuring out new technologies, that comes from a lifetime of experience, if you will. So, believe it or not, this year marks my 36th year as a water treatment scientist.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I've been in the business for a while. And over the years, as I've learned a number of different technologies, my mind goes to how can we combine these different technologies into one thing that is unique and has some special characteristics. And I will say that I've been thinking over things like that for quite some time. And when I proposed these ideas to my Garratt-Callahan colleagues, they were very proactive. And Jeff Garratt himself was very supportive in this and came by and said, yes, we think that there's a process here and we believe it's worth patenting. And so the company got behind that and started doing the scaling up work and supporting all of the research that it was involved in creating bench scale systems and then larger scale systems, et cetera. If I can bring it back to what we were talking about to a customer who comes to us, when we propose these ideas, we don't want to just say, okay, please give us $1 million and we'll show you it works. So we have a series of different tests and we'll take water from their site and we can show them in what looks like a jar test that anybody who does wastewater treatment would do, but with these specific chemistries, show them how we can remove all of the high hardness of their solids and show them essentially what purity we can get back. Now, at the end of the AERO system, there is a polishing RO step, which we don't simulate in the jar test, but we do simulate the hardness removal. If the customer likes that, we have then partnered with another company by the name of BioLargo, and they are an engineering arm for us in this process. We will test customer waters at the BioLargo site, which is located in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, stone's throw from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. We will test the customer water there on site with a unit that operates at 5 to 10 gallons per minute in a flow through process. And we will invite the customers to watch and see how their process actually works. And at that point, we do an RO on the end so we know what we're getting. We do a simulated filter press so that you can understand what sorts of solids you would get. We analyze all of these results. And from that point, then the next step is to get working with the engineering team. And once you've decided you really are interested in buying a system, we take the steps to engineer one specifically for you, for your specifications. And any monies that you've spent on the upfront testing goes as a credit towards your final purchase.
Before we dive deeper into our interview, we're going to take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. Three industry titans, Masters Company, Radical Polymers, and MFG Chemical, have joined forces to create your ultimate one-stop shop for your water treatment needs. We're talking over 60 years of Masters Company's expertise in private label products and cutting-edge test kits. Radical Polymers' game-changing Inisha additives, and MFG Chemical's custom manufacturing prowess. These American companies are bringing you top-notch quality and reliability all under one umbrella. From blending and ultra concentrates to specialized polymers and custom solutions, they've got you covered. And with multiple AWT Supplier of the Year awards between them, you know you're getting the best of the best. Ready to revolutionize your water treatment game? Head over to scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. Let's jump back in right where we left off. So now the customer is all in. They say they want to do this. What are you and your team doing, one, to ensure what's actually being installed works the way that you want it to? And how do you prove that?
That's a great question. And thank you for asking that. So as I said, we work with a team from the BioLargo company, and their team together with our team, we have worked with this so long that they actually offer a process guarantee that says if this equipment doesn't work as promised, we'll take it back. We'll give you your money back. We'll refund it if we can't make it work. And so in the beginning, we will have a lot of engineers out on site and a lot of experts helping you learn to run the system, optimizing what you're putting into it. And going back to what you mentioned earlier, making sure that all the pre-treatment ahead of this system is appropriate so that the water is prepped and ready to do what we can do with it at that point.
And of course, the customer wants this to work because without water, they can't do what they need to do.
Exactly. One of the other interesting points, I told you the capital expenditure costs on this, but it's interesting that our footprint for the AERO system versus a zero liquid discharge evaporative system is also several orders of magnitude smaller than what you would do, and our ongoing operational costs. So it actually is a fairly compact system. I jokingly say that this 10 gallon per minute system looks about the size of a VW bug. If you were thinking about that, it could easily fit into one small shipping container.
Have you ever had the instance where the customer says, yes, this is exactly what we need, but you didn't have the footprint for it?
We have not gotten to that point yet. I hope that we do, and we'll figure out how to do that, because if you need the footprint and you don't have it, there are all kinds of options, including using vertical space instead of horizontal space.
A lot of times customers will come to us and they don't know the right information to give us. How do we ensure we're asking the right questions so we get everything that we need so we can engineer the best solution for them?
That's where it's super important that the customer who comes to us has someone boots on the ground that understands the water treatment. And usually this is someone like one of the people from Garratt-Callahan or any other of the numerous water treatment companies that you have out there, someone that has worked in the field and understands their process. And this is where we begin pulling teams together. I will ask questions that someone who's primarily in cooling might not ask, because I've seen both cooling and reverse osmosis and boiler and wastewater treatment. And so if you get some of us old folks from the water treatment industry in there, chances are we'll see some of the interconnections and be able to ask the right questions. That's why it's super important that we work as a team on this. And in fact, if someone were purchasing an AERO system, there's a setup where they would make payments sequentially. First, after the first discussions, we would present to them, here are the drawings. This is what it looks like. Do you approve? No? Then we'll redo the drawings. And if yes, then we'll take the next step. Then we'll start building that. Do you still approve of that? Are you happy with it? Now we're going to deliver it and we're going to bring our engineers on site and make it work. And so nothing happens in a vacuum. We're not saying give us an order and we're going to deliver something in 6 months and you'll be happy or you won't. We will be with you the whole way, asking you more questions and probably saying, not only is what we're doing here going to help you, but here are 3 other opportunities that we can improve your overall process.
Something that comes to mind when you were telling us about your process is I'm sure somebody's listening out there and they've had an experience where somebody was very familiar with a person up in the front of the process. And then as they went through the process, that person changed. And maybe they didn't have the same relationship with the next person. Maybe there was even another person that was brought in. So there wasn't that continuity of trust that went through the entire process. What is your recommendation when we're meeting new people, we're solving their problems, we're making their problems go away? How should we make sure we keep that customer touch in every aspect?
I don't believe that there's any substitute for actually being in the plant and talking with your customers. And as they move through their careers and you move through your careers, it's important to keep functioning teams being built. And so scale, if we think about scale, we know as scientists that it forms and it dissolves and it forms and it dissolves. And this is a dynamic process. Well, customer relationships are like that. They're dynamic processes too. So some people leave and new people step in, but the overall structure of the working team remains largely the same. We have to be open about what information we're bringing to the table and giving. And I think it's very important. For example, our salespeople, after every visit, give reports of their findings and consequences of findings and their recommendations. And those are important things to keep documented so that whoever changes, you constantly know what's at stake, what a solution is, and what would happen if that solution isn't implemented. So then you can start weighing your options. So, for example, if you don't put corrosion inhibitors in your cooling tower, you may have to replace your tower sooner, or your piping, or whatever. If you can't afford the corrosion inhibitors, or you stop them and you start having to replace things, why did this happen? We can go back and say, here would have been the solution. Let's make sure moving forward we protect things. And so we always have to learn what's at stake and what the steps are to protecting your equipment and your people. And so good record keeping is important, but really there's no substitute for being in the plant, meeting people, meeting the new people coming up, making sure if you have new people in your water treatment company that they're coming along with you and learning this. The thing you don't want is to have a relationship die just because you ignored it.
It's a great point. A post-COVID world, we're doing a lot of meetings online. Do you think we can have the same type of meeting online that we do in person?
I've learned a lot about online meetings since the COVID era. And here is in general my belief. I think it's very important when we can that we meet people in person. But once you've met someone in person, that online relationship becomes a whole lot easier to maintain. It's more difficult if you're meeting a stranger online only. And there you have to work a little bit harder at making sure that you build time to get to know one another into that meeting time. So I don't advise people jump right into here's the problem, here's how we're going to fix it. You know, as you and I talked, we started talking about something a little more fun. We're talking about my writing, and now we're talking about how chemistry works in the real world. We now know each other and we've built a trust relationship on more than one item. And once you do that, then you're not looking at random people trying to sell you stuff. You're looking at friends who have things in common with you, who want to help you succeed while they also succeed.
Kelle, again, congratulations on 36 years in this industry. I want to ask you, what are some of the changes that you've seen from day one to now?
Well, that's an interesting question for me to reflect back on. I've worked in my water treatment years for 3 different companies. And you might have heard of a company called Nalco, which is where I started my water treatment expertise. I was courted away from them to go to a company whose primary work was in making the components and ingredients that went into water treatment chemistries. And then I joined Garratt-Callahan about 12 years ago. And I will say that I have seen some changes in the industry, and that is that when I started, there were 2 very dominant, very large players. And over the years, they have broken up a bit and made room for other players who were perhaps less well known than the big 2. And many new companies have stepped up and started filling that void. One thing that I'm proud of for being at Garratt-Callahan is that throughout these years, when we were the sort of smaller water treatment company, and then we've grown and continued to double in size, we have maintained that customer intimacy. And I think many companies, when they grow, lose that touch and that customer intimacy. So I have seen larger companies or specialty companies sometimes falter because they forget who their customer is. And back to when I said it works better when your customers are also your friends and you're working together to make things better. Sometimes if a water treatment company puts so much pressure on their salespeople that they ask them sell, sell, sell rather than build relationship, build relationship, build relationship, I see things begin to falter. And so that's one of the sad things that happens in our industry. On the other hand, we have such talented new young people coming into the area, really excited to learn. It's not something that's taught in most graduate schools or science companies or science schools as a major or a way to go into the world. But water treatment is so interesting and it's such a rich field. I'm always delighted when we get a really talented scientist who comes in and says, wow, I never thought about the impact I could have doing this.
Looking back, what do you think one of the biggest technological changes has been that you've witnessed?
When I started, it was before there were lots of tracing materials and chemicals added in. And I think that that has become an industry standard almost these days. And so while I want to say that that is one of the big technological changes is that everybody traces things, I also see that the world goes back to its roots more and more often too. Once upon a time, chemical treaters sold solids, and then they sold liquids only, and then they sold liquids and solids. And now we have things like solid contact feeders that automatically dissolve the materials in correct proportions. And so now we're using less energy to get that to customers. And we're offering options that are not the messy powders of yesteryear, but ways that are thick liquids and solids that help too. All of those things are good. And all of those things tempt us to forget that the human element and the human brain is super important. I mean, one of the books that I'm reading recently is called Co-Intelligence, and it's about how to survive working with AI in new areas. And I think the AI initiatives are going to make a huge impact on how much our customers understand about water treatment and how much they misunderstand. And so as we move forward, I think we need people who are able to parse the difference between what an AI scraping data from a million sources can do versus what a human who has worked in the industry specifically can recommend. And so I think that'll be our biggest challenge.
Kelle, how would you say that the best combination for a human, a water treater, putting in data, working with AI, and presenting that to the customer would be? We've got so many camps out there. There's some people that absolutely love AI. There's some people that are scared of AI. There's some people that have no idea how to use AI. How do we bring all of those camps together?
It's going to be a learning curve for sure. I'm going to quote a friend of mine who once upon a time said, "We have to learn to work with AI when it's still a toddler before it grows up into the sixth grade bully and beats you up for your lunch money." So, in the spirit of learning to work with AI, it's a lot like raising a kid, if you will. You've got to feed it good, solid, nutritional food if you're raising a child and you want it to be healthy. With AI, you have to give it good, solid scientific information and data if you're working in our industry. And so, one of our challenges is going to be curating what the AI learns from. So, within our company, we've got decades, if not millennia, well, not millennia, but hundreds of years of man hours of experience of things. And we are trying to teach our own internal AIs, look at these documents that experts have created over the years, learn from them, and now make intuitive leaps from that. And so I think the challenge is making sure that we feed the AIs with real information and not pseudoscience and real world problems. And then when it comes up with a recommendation, we read it with a critical eye because an AI will give you a great outline for a presentation, but it won't give you a full presentation. It won't bring your knowledge and your experience in. And so use it to form a framework upon which you then add your experience to embellish and reach the real problems.
Well, Kelle, we'll make sure to put the paper we referred to on our show notes page so people can follow along and read with that. That, of course, has your contact information if they want to reach out and ask you direct questions. But I do want to advance you to round 2 of the lightning round if you're ready for it.
All right, let's go for it.
All right. So, round 2, question number 1. What would you say your superpower is?
My superpower is being able to take something really technical and hard to understand and make it accessible for smart people everywhere who may or may not have background in that area.
It's a great superpower to have. Now, you have 36 years of experience to think on. What would you say your biggest accomplishment has been?
I think my biggest accomplishment has been to continue growing functional teams and mentoring those who are going to follow in my footsteps down the road. And I think that's important for all of us. Make sure that we add to the knowledge base of the world and we add to the functionality of it. And we make sure that when we're gone, there won't be a vacuum of knowledge or skills.
You mentioned before there's so many young people coming into this industry. What advice do you have for them?
One of my big pieces of advice that I give to everyone is that persistence overcomes almost anything. And that with the right team of people behind you, you can learn anything. I will tell this story, and this I think is the first time I've ever publicly told it, although I will tell it to new hires who come in to work with me. When I was getting my PhD in science, the trajectory was that you would go from your bachelor's degree, you would do your independent research in chemistry, and you would come out with a PhD degree. And somewhere in the middle, they would have a little interim round where they looked at your body of work and decided, gave you guidance on what you would do next. And sometimes in that interim round, they would look at you and they would say, we're going to give you a master's degree. And in the chemistry world of that time, that was code for, we don't think you have what it takes to go further. And so I actually have a master's degree in chemistry, and I understood the code was that my mentors did not believe I had what it took to go further. And I was embarrassed by this for many, many decades. I tell this story now because, as those who were listening in the beginning know, I do have a PhD in chemistry and years of experience because I refuse to give up. My answer to someone who says you can't do this is watch me. And so if you're young and you come up against an obstacle, remember there are multiple ways around that, and there are multiple ways to get past it. Don't ever give up. Keep looking for those ways and look for the people who are going to help you move forward, because you don't have to do it all on your own.
I love that answer. That was actually a bonus question. I'm so glad I asked it.
It took me a long time to get comfortable with feeling stupid. And yet when you feel stupid, you are operating at the limits of your knowledge, perhaps, and that's when you're growing. And there's a great deal of power for especially the young people, but any of us, to understand that it's okay not to know everything. My favorite introduction when I'm asking for help is, hi, I'm not very smart about this area. Can you help me because you're good in it? And usually people say, but you are smart. I said, yes, but not about the area where you're good. I need your help. And people love that. They love to be able to help and become part of a solution.
That's a great way to tee that up. Kelle, if you had a magic wand that can change anything in the world, what would you change?
I would change the attitude that says we don't have to listen to one another and respect one another's experience. We've moved in an area where experience is sometimes considered less important than a Google search of a topic. And I would like to take us back to a point where we respect the effort and the thought that goes into learning a field and then being able to talk to people about it.
Kelle, my last question, and this is selfish so I can get my book count up. What are 5 books that you think everyone should read this year?
5 books that everyone should read this year. Well, I'm going to go back to my list of some of the ones that I have queued up on mine. So, as I said, I'm reading Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI. I think that's going to be a great book to help us get comfortable with AI. Another one, and you might find this really interesting, but it's called Sensitive: The Hidden Power of the Highly Sensitive Person in a Loud, Fast, Too Much World. Some of us tend to be more introverted than others. And so this is targeted to people who are on the introverted side of that spectrum of behavior. And it talks about how to maximize what works for you and make the world continue to work for you. I think we all need to learn to play to our strengths. And for those of us silent, there's that one. Another book that I'm working my way through is called Empower Your Investing: Adopting Best Practices, from Peter Lynch, John Templeton, and Warren Buffett. And it's talking about investment strategies, because we also have come to a part in our world. When I started in water treatment, they had these things called pensions that you paid into, and your company would give you money when you retired. And then they switched to these things called 401ks that you paid into, and you got money when you retired if you were smart. And all of those continue to change. And we need to find experts who are good in that area. We're water treaters. We're good in that. we might be stupid about investing. So find someone who's smart about it and work with them. So that's 3 of the ones that I would recommend. And of course, I want everybody to go out there and buy my Cupcake Caper book and
Of
all the
course.
rest of the science books in there. So I think I've got you up to 4. I don't know about 5. I would say add in something that entertains and delights you just because you deserve that at the end of the day.
There it is. Well, Dr. Kelle Zeiher, thank you for coming for the second round, the second time to the Scaling Up H2O podcast. Love having you on as a guest.
I can't wait to be here for the 3rd time. Thank you so much for this time to chat about water treatment together.
Well, Kelle, once again, thank you for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. Kelle is always so fun to talk to and so much knowledge. And Nation, have you read her books? So check out, we'll have some affiliate pages on our show notes page. She has the pen name of Kelle Z. Riley, and she has some really interesting books. So you might enjoy that. And she puts things that you might recognize in the industrial water treatment space into her books. So make sure you go on scalinguph2o.com, go to this episode's show notes page, and we'll have Kelle's books listed there. We will also have all the references that she mentioned. And we'll also have a discussion guide. And the discussion guide is something that we did this year. We kind of tried it out in 2004 with a handful of episodes, but we really learned how to do it during 2025. And that came directly from a Scaling Up Nation member. They said that they love to have conversations with their team on their regular weekly meetings about the previous week's podcast episode. And have I ever considered doing a discussion guide with that? And I asked them, well, what would be helpful? And they said, well, simply just questions that we can have the team answer, that we can answer, and it would allow us to dive deeper into whatever topic that podcast was about. So we looked into that. We created systems and processes around that. So in 2025, each and every episode has included a discussion guide. And when I was at the most recent Association of Water Technologies conference, I was delighted that there are so many people out there that are using the discussion guide to bring each episode into their day-to-days by assigning that either to themselves and they work on it themselves, or they're assigning that to their teams and they're working that into their regular meeting. Nation, if you have not partaken of the discussion guide, well, there's one for every episode this year. If you haven't introduced that to your team, maybe that's something that you start doing on this episode and maybe every episode in the next new year, so you can start advancing things that you want to learn more about on this podcast, from this podcast, and you can bring that into your team, and your entire team now can have a very good discussion around whatever topic it is that you want to bring to them. I received, again, so many great comments from people at AWT, and then when people were telling me about how they were using them, there were always people in that crowd that said they had no idea that we were even doing that. Folks, we have so many new things that are happening within the Scaling Up Nation community, those discussion guides. We are now doing articles on some of the more complex and very popular shows that we have aired in the AWT Analyst. So we have that. We have so many things. If you are not connected to us on social media, or if you are not getting our weekly newsletter, you might be missing out on content that you can use to improve your career, that you can use to improve your team, that you can use to improve the industrial water treatment community. So simply go to our website, scalinguph2o.com. and click on the pop-up that comes up. And normally that's either a discussion guide or our newsletter. And if you don't see that, you can simply go up to the top bar and you can subscribe to those things. And you can simply enhance each and every episode that you listen to make the water treatment community that much better. Nation, I sure appreciate you being a member of the Scaling Up Nation. Be sure that you make this December the best December yet. And of course, we've got some great new episodes for you in the last couple of weeks of this year. And as always, the last week of the year, I'm going to do a recap for you of all the different stats and things that we've learned over 2025. And it's my hope that you do the same thing for you and your company as well. There's always so much to learn from our actual history. We want to make sure that we're learning what life is trying to tell us, and we're making the next year that much better because of that. So stay tuned for the last episode of this year where I'm going to do that very thing. But of course, we have a couple more weeks before that one airs. So be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode. And until then, remember to raise the bar in the industrial water treatment industry. Have a great week, folks. Achieve your goals with the Rising Tide Mastermind. Set your sights on success and let us help you get there. Our mastermind group provides the accountability and support you need to achieve your personal and professional goals. To find out more, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you.